Hi, my name is Joseph Forster. I am a student at GRCC, Grand Rapids Community College. I'm seeking to get my associate's degree in business administration. Today, I will be discussing the differences between a nonprofit and for-profit businesses. And the question I'm going to ask and answer is, can a nonprofit business own a for-profit business? There's a lot of different things that go into this, so I'll try to give you a brief understanding and summary of it all. So let's dive right in, and I hope you all learned something today. Here, so the question is, how can a nonprofit business own a for-profit business, and what are the differences between a nonprofit and for-profit businesses? Well, let's start with the differences between those. There's These can be divvied up into four main groups: the goals of the company, leadership, taxes, and funding. Those four are going to be the four we're going to discuss and regarding the differences between a nonprofit and a for-profit. So let's start with goals. The goals of a nonprofit seek to provide a service or a product. For-profit seeks to sell a service or a product for profit. So the difference between those two are a nonprofit provides the service usually for a local community. This can be done through healthcare. You'll see it such as like a dentist office that provides free dental work for low-income people in their community, and they just once they bill the insurance that the patients have, or if they don't have any, it just gets written off, and the company pays for those services that they provided for that patient. Um, for profit seeks to sell a service or product for profit. So an example of this would be your healthcare workers, where you go in, they bill your insurance, and then it ends up being that you have a $30 copay. You would pay that copay, and the company makes money, the insurance makes money, and the consumer gets a service and pays for that service. Um, Examples of nonprofit businesses can also include like soup kitchens, where donations come in, and the donations go directly to feeding the poor, low income people that need a meal. Um, the second difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit would be that of leadership. Nonprofit companies usually consist of a CEO and or a board of directors. For-profit companies usually consist of a CEO, board of directors, and stakeholders. Some of you may be wondering what a stakeholder is. The actual definition of a stakeholder is any person, organization, social group, or society at large that has a stake in the business. Thus, stakeholders can be internal or external to the business. A stake is a vital interest in the business or its activities. So, to put this simply, a stakeholder is somebody who wants to see the company make profits, because those profits directly go to their pockets in the end, if there are profits for that fiscal year. So stakeholders not necessarily have a say in what the company does, but their voices are definitely heard regarding any big decisions that are made. They're usually just consulted about it before big decisions are put into place. Um, the Another difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit would be that of taxes, and a lot of people don't really realize this. But non-profit businesses fall into a completely separate tax bracket, and this essentially makes it so they don't have to pay taxes at all. This is a huge benefit for them, because they're not necessarily looking for profit. So if they're not they can focus on the service that they provide, and instead of having to worry about paying X amount of dollars every year back to the government. Whereas a for-profit company has to pay those taxes back. And this can be, I mean, if you're looking at different organizations, whether big or small. I mean, if you're looking at a big organization, it can be upwards of a couple $1 million a year that they owe back in taxes. Whereas if you're a nonprofit, you wouldn't have to pay those back. Those are technically in your organization's they're part of their revenue, and then once they get to the end of the year, they deem it necessary on how they distribute those funds or whether they gets donated back to the community that they are in. The third difference between nonprofit and for-profit companies is that of funding. A for-profit business, when they're starting out, it usually will consist of donations from people in the community that want to see that business opened up and thrive in their neighborhood. The second difference would be bank loans, or excuse me, not difference. Second way that they would get funding is bank loans. Third is local investors, and fourth is from their revenue that they create from the product or service that they're providing. This is different from a nonprofit because nonprofits get funding from private donations, corporate sponsorships, or government grants. So the difference between these two is mainly that these are donations or grants where they don't have to pay them back. So even if the company isn't profitable at the end of the year, they don't have to worry about the expenses that they accumulated from creating this business. So those are the main differences between nonprofit and for-profit companies. This graph here just goes to show where revenue comes from for a nonprofit company. It can come from many different areas. The majority of them comes from the revenue that they create, but it can come from government grants, fees for services and goods from the government, and private contributions. So how can a nonprofit business own a for-profit business? This is something where a lot of people don't really understand how this works because it doesn't really get advertised regarding it. But there are some loopholes that companies can jump through in order to have a nonprofit own a business that is for-profit. So we'll dive into that right now. So in order for a nonprofit business to have a portion of its business be profitable or for profit, they have to create a separate business within the business itself. So essentially what they do is they create a business, so it's two businesses under one entity. A local example of this would be Spectrum Health and Priority Health. The way this is done is Spectrum Health is nonprofit, so they, at the end of the year, they have to donate either all their money back or invest it into infrastructure or back into the company, or however they deem it necessary. Whereas Priority Health gets to keep their earnings at the end of the year. The way this is done is Spectrum Health owns Priority Health, and Priority Health keeps their earnings, whereas Spectrum has to donate it. So this is a way that this is completed. They're under there's two different businesses under one entity. So Priority Health is technically part of Spectrum Health, but it's separate business. So this is one way that this is created and how it functions. So essentially, Priority Health gets to keep their earnings at the end of the year, whereas Spectrum Health has to donate it, but Spectrum doesn't have to pay taxes at the end of the year. So they get to have that benefit of identifying as a nonprofit, whereas Priority Health would have to donate those at the end of the year. I just want to say thank you for listening to my presentation today. I hope I gave you a pretty brief and all-around understanding of how a for-profit business and a nonprofit business can function together under one entity but separate names. So thank you, and may you all have a great day.